the Florida State University Board of Trustees will meet virtually at 10 a.m. Friday, December 22nd. The meeting agenda will be published and when available, and you can find that on their website and a link to the live webcast and all that stuff. But, you can also just tune right here as we're talking about, because we'll probably watch it together in some form of a Warchant watch thing is what Tom is telling me now. Either way, a lot of people won't even want to do that either, because whatever, we're going to find out what it is. And if you're busy, don't worry about it. But here's the deal. This has been, as you correctly noted, kind of rumored and to be in the coffers for some time, that something's got to give. This is just a little word of advice for people out there. When you watch, let's say I'm going to talk about big websites. I'm going to talk about like a national thing. Like, let's say you go to NBC Sports for baseball or wherever you go. Like, let's say you go to ESPN.com for college football. Maybe you don't. I don't care. This is to make a broader point. There are good journalists who do a very good job and they're wildly consistent, and thus they're rewarded for that consistency in the way of maybe being tipped off about certain things or the types of stories you might read from a noted journalist who's done a good job can tip you off to what's about to happen within weeks, sometimes months. If you noted last week, everybody, Andrea Adelson posted a story that looked a lot like a regurgitation of a previous story. It didn't seem like there was any meat on the bone to that story. And I said, that's kind of strange. Yep. Andrea is well respected in the industry, and she is talking about something that we've known for a while. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, moreover, I think this is a couple of days ago that story comes up, but moreover, she's there for Mike Norvell's press conference yesterday for signing day. That's not an event that Andrea Adelson would be dispatched to go cover. So that means that you're on the ground, you're in town.
Yeah.
Okay, you're on the ground and you're in town. Near Christmas? Okay.
Yeah, so what are the indicators is what we're talking about. When you saw that story, and there was one a week ago, and then Tom's right, 2 days ago, there was another one where she says that there's a conversation about Florida State's situation. It also mentioned the Big Ten. It mentioned a couple of things, and people have been kind of worried, or not worried, interested for a number of weeks. It keeps coming back, comes up on our boards, comes up all the time on Twitter. I see it on every social media platform. I get emails about it. You do too. Occasionally I get a text from somebody, his close friend down in Tampa. Hey man, what's the scuttlebutt? I'm hearing this, hearing that. All of it seemed to be centered around the Big Ten. I don't think that's what that meeting's about tomorrow, but everything is to the ultimate end of getting out of this conference. I mean, let's just put two and two together here, everybody. Whether it's the Big Ten or the SEC, you got to be in one of the two at this point. And that point was hammered home during the latest screwing. So this has been known for a long time, and you can just assume, I think safely, context clues matter. That to that end, they're trying everything they possibly can to get the hell out of here. So that can include a number of things. That can include, yes, maybe working out a deal behind the scenes somehow, some way with a power conference. It could also be that you file a lawsuit. It could also be that you're announcing a partnership with a hedge fund. I don't, like the kinds of things we've seen in the past.
Yeah, to that end, that's an article by Fama last night that is 90% useless, but 10% informative as to how Florida State would execute the exit. It's still worded in all suppositions and implications and assumptions. But one of the things that I noted last night that was behind one of their paywalls, we have it so I can watch hockey games out of market, is that private equity would fund, what is necessary up front for Florida State to do what it needs to do. Now, that's something we covered before the season started. At length, we covered the details of how a private equity could help Florida State get to where it's going. But that private equity wouldn't engage Florida State in the first place if it didn't believe that there was going to be significant return on investment.
Correct.
Because private equity gets paid back at a profit. These are people involved with that are not idiots when it comes to making money. No. They probably wouldn't get all that tied up in, say, NIL and collectives because they're interested on return and investment when you're talking about private equity. So I think by nature of private equity getting involved with Florida State to help fund where they're going tells me that through back channels, they have assurances about where they're going and the types of money that would be coming in over the long term. Otherwise, the firms would not even hear Florida State's case. And the other part of that was Board of Trustees member Drew Weatherford's name came up during that because he's been pushing the narrative of private equity. And Thamel nicely puts in the article a couple sentences later, he works for a private equity firm. Like, you don't think this guy's got an angle? Like, look, we're all Noles here. Everybody puts their spin on it. But yeah, man, that's a connected dude down in the city of Tampa. That family's well-to-do. His post-Florida State football career has been dealing in PE. So, yeah, man, I mean, there's no coincidence that some of these steps that we're going to take are connected to the board members themselves. I say great if it gets us the hell out of here.
Ultimately, if you're listening to this, that's all you care about. You might care about some of the details because the devil is in the details. But typically, if you're driving around, you love Florida State, you're a sports fan, you're listening to this show, what's going on with my school? What's happening with Florida State football? What do we have to do to improve our situation? All you really want to know is, ultimately, does this expedite all of that? Do we get to a place where Florida State's in a better place within a year or 2 or 3? Is there a timetable? Are we approaching a situation where we're going to know more with a greater degree of clarity about what Florida State's going to be or who they're going to be with and who they're going to owe money to and what conference they're going to play in? But ultimately, you just need to be the hell out of here. And I think everybody understands that. And so, you know, you hear a lot of things. As I said, I'm going to talk with Gene Williams later in the show. He is an attorney and not a practicing attorney, obviously, but Gene has a greater background in the law. So I'm going to ask him some big, broad questions because I'm a layman. I don't know anything about how this works. I do know that if there's ever sort of a lawsuit filed, that it ends up staying in the courts where the case is filed. So that would be in Florida, which is seemingly beneficial for Florida State. If that's what the angle is, I don't know. You can try to deduce these things. I'll ask Gene that question. But I mean, I think if you're Florida State, maybe ultimately whatever you do is meant to speed up the process. You can't wait around until 2036. So this is going to be more about, hey, look, you're going to hear large sums of money. You're going to hear about this, who's going to get this, what they're suing for, if they sue, whatever it is, what the ACC would want. That will be all speculative. At the end of the day, I think what they're trying to do and what everybody wants them to do is figure out the fastest route out of here.
Here is a great analogy for people that are just regular Joes like you and me. How many ads do you hear on sports talk radio, if you love the medium like we do, for debt consolidation or for settling matters with the big man and the government, right?
Yeah.
That's what Florida State, in my opinion, is doing right now. Maybe through some political channels,
Sure.
like the Attorney General of the state saying that they want discovery from the College Football Playoff Committee and ESPN, that they're subpoenaing email records and so forth. That you might have the senator in the state of Florida calling for this, that, and the other to prove the minutes of the meetings, the votes, the electronic voting system, all of that. That you may have an actual lawsuit that would be a home game kept in the state of Florida for every part of the ruling, be it, the basic one, any appeals, all that kind of stuff. You're playing a home game. So it's like a lot of people in collections departments blowing up your phone if you're on hard times. And then you hear about this thing called debt consolidation. You're like, oh my God, I could just pay one bill a month and I could make all these calls go away. I think that is what Florida State is trying to do here, and maybe the state of Florida, in addition to the university. It all converges on the conference. It all converges on the network where they say, how can I consolidate this into one simple thing so the phone calls stop and my troubles stop? And that would be, what's the number? Which is what we've talked about for years.
I was just about to say, this is, and that's a good example, Tom. I like the analogy. This is a long-winded way of you and I going back to a conversation we've been having for a very long time when we recognize the importance of getting out of the ACC and in a hurry. How soon can we get to a tenable number? Mm-hmm. What is that number? What is that number? Because it ain't going to be like people hear $120 million to get out of the ACC. Yeah, but they got your grant of rights. That's the bigger number. That's the number where they've got you. They got you, okay? So the $120 million, we would have wrote that check 2 years ago. $120 million, Jesus, that's nothing. So you'd have written that check already. It's the speculated $900 million, $800 million, $750 million that goes along with the $120 million that the ACC would need for you to get out of the grant of rights. And those numbers were astronomical at one time. if you can get that down to a number that perhaps, and we're speculating, the private equity firm could handle and is willing to do, then maybe you're set to get the heck out of here sooner rather than later. Maybe that number becomes 500 million, maybe it becomes 300 million, whatever it becomes. And if this is all brought on by whatever they're meeting about tomorrow, then so be it.
Right, exactly. You don't need private equity to cut the exit fee.
No.
We could do that.
Yeah.
We don't need to call in a third party to cut a $120 million check. If private equity is brought into this process, it is because it's for the big fish. Now,
it's a massive number, yeah.
Peter Collins told us, and good job, Pete, for citing warchant.com on ESPN, that is not the document that is going to prohibit us from doing what we want. My assumption is, as the facts became clear, that he knew that private equity was a place that we could potentially go to make the payments necessary. I think what they've been doing, man, is that they've been working so hard to find a case to where they don't owe anything with the grant of rights. It's an exit fee and they're gone. Get out of here for as little as possible, but perhaps the events of the last 3 weeks have sped up the process where they say, this is untenable. I know it's going to cost more, but we have to do something. We've got to do something now.
Well, because lost in the disappointment and the spirit of fair play, which was not adhered to, right, is the dollar, right? Like, so we talk a lot about those kids getting screwed and the sacrifices they made, and we should. That should be the emphasis of that talking point regarding what happened to FSU and the committee. And Mike Norvell's disappointment in that, and having to have conversations with embittered and angry young men who are having a hard time channeling that frustration as you prepare for a bowl game and kids are leaving and you're just trying to sign a class. It's been a crazy time. But the other part of that screw job by the committee is Florida State lost out on millions of dollars.
Right. Yes.
And so that, listen, that's what talks at some point. Yeah, our heart bleeds for people who get screwed over by politics and money. But man, the money is really where FSU goes again with this. We are around every turn. We are shown in big, bright lights the ways that we're getting absolutely crushed in the race for the almighty dollar as it pertains to our competitors in the same geographical footprint. So at that point, you're like, man, again with this, we're a second-class citizen now because the ACC has just been shown not to matter. Okay, so we can't even just say, well, if we're really good in football, we'll be rewarded. Maybe not. Maybe it won't be. So at that point, you're like, well, okay, all right, that's it. We hate it, but we're going to have to do this.
Yeah, and that's where, like, even if you look at the political side of things, and perhaps you believe that the person sending the letter is basically like Bernie Madoff, but he's a senator, and I do. But when you get a disingenuous reply that says, I know you've got a busy schedule. I'm glad you're trying to reach out to me about college football. Man, it's about the money. You have economically impacted the state of Florida in a negative way to the tune of easily 8 figures. That is the ramification of a decision to leave us out of the Invitational as an undefeated so-called Power 5 conference, as Bill Hancock said. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And so, therefore, I think, again, they might have wanted to wait well into 2024. You're not calling an emergency board meeting the Friday before Christmas. These people don't work on Christmas. They don't work anywhere close to Christmas ever. You don't call an emergency board meeting for Friday, December the 22nd, unless you felt that you were compelled to have to take a step before you were thinking that you were going to have to take a step. That's what's coming here. To me, the most important thing moving forward in this discussion, because I feel like this chain of events is now moving. The dominoes are falling. We're going to get out of this conference one way or another. Where are we going? Yeah. And do we get a full share? Because the stuff that was in the article last night on ESPN was talking about Oregon and Washington not getting full price to go into the Big Ten. Obviously, the SEC doesn't want to take less money, all of their member institutions, for somebody within their own footprint. So it would seem to me the better chance to get a full share immediately would be the Big Ten. But I just want to know, how many cents on the dollar are we getting and for how long to leave the conference? Or are we going to be a fully vested, fully shared partner of our new destination, whatever that comes?
There's so much to talk about here, too, because that Florida State is obviously acting on their own behalf, but that they are in cahoots with Clemson. They are in cahoots with others. They have been. We know that there were other member institutions that feel equally as uncomfortable about the financial devastation that they are wrought in this ACC. So I know we don't have to worry about NC State. Screw them eternally. I know we don't worry about any of these other programs, but we have been kind of tied at the hip with Clemson. I am very curious. And also, by the way, when you do the numbers, right, when you start to do the math.
Correct. But here's the thing that pissed me off about the article. Again, I'm citing this a lot, but this is clearly a leak job from many different parties. You know, Pete might be carrying the water in one paragraph for Greg Sankey, and then another paragraph for us, another paragraph for Clemson, North Carolina. But what it says, and that's a lot of, I mean, he's probably pretty strong then. Yeah. But what it says is that Clemson and North Carolina are willing to sit back and watch us do this and then play off of it. So we have to be the effing trailblazers here.
Just go be the trailblazers.
That's fine. But let history remember that those cowards, decided not to walk side by side with us as we tried to make something happen and make something more of our future.
Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, we're never going to like them anyhow. The point is you just got to do what's in your best interest here. Who comes and goes, I don't really care. We got to worry about us. There's no future in this conference.